Hey, welcome to Life After Addiction Indictment. This is your host, Steve Cloward. Today, I've got a guest who had a 21-year career. I just recently met him and was just so intrigued by his journey and his path that got him to where he's at now as a full-time podcaster, making very good money that allowed him to actually quit his job after 21 years. So welcome, Larry. I appreciate your time.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. I really appreciate this. Now I can't even talk. Hey, man.
It's par for the course today. Just take
hey,
two.
Man, thanks for having me.
Make sure we are recording.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. This is a tremendous opportunity to join you today. Thank you so much.
Hey, man, it's even a bonus to have that killer radio voice, you know. That's something. When I listen to your podcast, Glenn, it's one of those voices that is just, who you're listening to. Well, as we got acquainted on Clubhouse a little bit one day about 3 weeks ago now, I got a little bit of insight in your story. You've been working for a company for 21 years, and I believe it was that week you were, it was going to be your last day, which has now been just a couple of weeks ago. And, I just had started my podcast not too long ago. I started one a year ago, November, but I kind of just wasn't 100% focused on my intention where I wanted to take it. And I think you must have seen the title and you've had some issues, but that can be part of what we hit on today. But it's really the important thing that I want people to see is, number one, the persistence that you've shown from what I know, and then just the evolution. And I look at it, it's beautiful because I've always kind of had the entrepreneurial spirit and I've always had my own business. And I think everybody deserves that if that's what they choose. I think oftentimes we're just doing what we're, quote, programmed to do, if you will. And man, anything's possible. And I think we're just cheating ourselves because we're okay with getting comfortable. And, if you're listening and you've always had a dream, whatever that is, it doesn't even have to be business and financially related. You can do it. You just got to dare to take that step. And, in this case, there's some things I've listened to you talk about in other Clubhouse rooms a couple of times. And, as I'm new to this, I do have someone that I'm working with, but I also look at you as a mentor in a sense. I do pay attention to your interviews, and I try to pick up things. And so the reason I say that is it's important, that if you're afraid or nervous or have anxiety or not sure, find somebody to look to as a mentor, and certainly don't be hesitant to ask people for help, because I think we all have stories around that. Most people enjoy helping. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. You made so many valid points there that I couldn't really make note in my mind as to which ones I wanted to comment on first, because there was so much greatness in what you said there. I'm still to this day a firm believer in having coaches and having direction. I believe when I first came out of high school, I don't have a degree or anything along those lines. I just kind of had the gift of gab. And when I came out of high school, I thought, what can I do that's not flipping burgers or working in the men's department of a retail store? So what ended up happening was I thought, well, I'm gonna sell cars. That's kind of cool. I like salesmen. They're slick. They're pretty smooth. They make a lot of money. So I eventually got hired on by a company, Red River Chrysler, Plymouth, Dodge, Jeep, Eagle in Sherman, Texas. It's a little town just up there on the border between Oklahoma and Texas. And they gave this kid dressed like a hip hop wannabe thugster his chance to sell cars. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't make fun of me. And they kind of, whenever, I don't know if everybody's bought cars, I'm sure. And when the salesman's showing you the car, he likes to walk around the car. That's technically called a walk around. Well, in my training, they had a week-long program they sent me to. And I was so into the hip hop scene that they moonwalked around the car as a demonstration to me.
That's awesome.
I'm like, oh, it's like that. Okay, I got you. That's cool. But the thing was, the trainer, he was just a tremendous a coach, a trainer, and he became a great friend. Gary Dunlap is his name. And to this day, he's still somebody that I look up to and still somebody that I learned from. And he had said something back then that stuck with me. He goes, if you want to be successful, find somebody to plug your umbilical cord into and plug into them. And for some reason, that stuck with me. And I don't know actually if it might be a little bit of a detriment, because it stuck with me so hardcore that throughout the rest of my life, and I'm like 19 when I hear it, right? So maybe even 18. And so as I go through life, I was always looking for someone to plug that umbilical cord into, to learn from and be successful. And to this day, I'm still a huge believer. I wouldn't say that I'm plugged in necessarily to any one person, but I have coaches for everything. I don't do anything without making sure that I'm following in someone's footsteps that has done it before me and can guide me to do it properly. So I'm
Amen.
Tremendous.
Yeah. It's like, as I've kind of been on my journey the last 10 years, kind of coming back from, when I crashed and burned, and, I do a lot of marketing for another company I've got. And one of the things that as I looked back and started evaluating, why am I not, it's interesting when you have success and then you lose it. It's amazing how the mind thinks that you got it the first time overnight. It took me years to build I had a real estate appraisal firm, and it was very successful. And it was a pain. It was grinding. It was taking the jobs that were 2.5, 3.5 hours away that no one would do just to build those relationships. But as I started to come back and do my own thing the last 10 years, impatience was kicking my ass. And I forgot that it didn't happen overnight, And so as I learned a lot about marketing and things, one of the things that I just to this day, I believe in wholeheartedly is, I was stuck grinding, trying to do everything. And at times when you're starting out, you will have to wear a lot of the, hats, because you oftentimes can't afford to pay for things. But
exactly,
even if you have to, put it on credit cards and stuff, as long as you're clear on your vision and you're in with both feet. I'm not going to say do anything like that if you're not totally committed, if you don't want to set yourself back. But it's so important to find the who and not the how. I was trying to learn the how to do everything, and that just wasn't serving me. It was keeping me stuck because I wasn't all in on each of the hows. I didn't love the hows on certain aspects. And so I wasn't being fair to myself because I wasn't all in to learn it to get really good at that specific task. So, that's really important. It's kind of the same thing with a mentor. I consistently continue to have coaches, and, Michael Jordan, the Kobe Bryants. I mean, if you read some of those stories about those gentlemen, nobody has a clue what those boys were doing behind the scenes. Those guys were freaking animals,
It's funny you brought those two up. I actually, and not many people know this, but I named my son after Michael Jordan.
Oh, right on. That's cool.
It was that era, man. I come from the Jordan era. And, I worshiped the ground that he flew on, and Amen. It was. So my son is Sean Michael, and the Michael is from Michael Jordan. So
that's cool. So talk to us a little bit about your 21-year career, and then kind of how you evolved to get where you are today, and if there's any pieces that relate to my history and addiction indictment. Go ahead and throw any bit of that in, and we'll just kind of chat about it.
Well, I've definitely been through my own battles of addiction and come out the other side, and we'll touch base on that. And I mean, I did 3 days in county. Does that count? I mean, I don't know.
That counts, man. I heard I was in a federal prison, and I heard county's way worse than what I experienced. I was at the camp level. It was pretty simple from that standpoint.
A buddy of mine did a couple of years in a federal at the camp level, and just for being a knucklehead. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. Yeah. And we're here to talk about me, not Chris. So don't try to take over Bones. We call him Bones. But anyways, the 21-year career, man, it started out wanting to get out of a small town, again, from Sherman, Texas. And I wanted to get to the big city, and Sherman's about 60 minutes north of Dallas. So I'm real close to the big city. And of course I had that vision of getting down and having my loft apartment that's staring over the skyline of the city. And that was the whole goal. Right. Yeah. So I found a company that was in line with what I had already had some experience in. I was a corporate trainer for Texas Instruments. And if you're not familiar with the company, you've probably used calculators. So I worked for TI for about 3 years. And I used that as a springboard to get me down to the big city. Now, the springboard didn't spring me quite as quickly as I had hoped, but I kept going down and kept going down. And after about the 7th interview with this one company, they finally brought me on. They're just like, dude, you're not going to go away, so we might as well give you a spot. So they brought me on as a trainer for their facility, one of their facilities, 500,000 square foot distribution center. And I came in as a trainer to write and implement policies and procedures for the DC, everything from picking orders to forklift driving to everything, packing the orders, the whole 9 yards.
Did they have some of that stuff in play, or was a lot of that missing? Because that's, to me, that's where most entrepreneurs and businesses as a whole fail. I mean, that foundation of systems and processes is the key.
Right.
You know, because I've been stuck, like I said, in other ways, but also in that way. You know, you got the mindset, or I've had it at least, oh, I can do it better than them, and it's going to waste too much of my time training them. But if you create that stuff in the beginning, somebody can leave a position. If you have all the training now, it's so simple to do it digitally and plug people in. That's just a huge key. So they didn't have it and you created it all.
I came in, wrote it from the ground up. They had nothing like that. They would come in, they'd bring their employees in. And at the time they had about 400 to 500% turnover rate in their distribution center, massive. And they would bring people in. They would literally go through them every day, new batch.
Sounds like there's a problem with culture there.
Well,
weren't appreciated, or what was the deal?
If you want to talk culture, again, I came from TI, and at TI I wore slacks and a shirt and a tie every day to work, and I was a trainer. And I tried rocking that same look. Now, granted, I was also fairly young, and I'm in my I was 26 maybe at the time. And I'd only had that one real corporate job, and that was TI. So I thought, well, this is another corporate job, even though it's in a warehouse. I have an office, and so I'm going to go to work in my tie and my starch, and I'm going to be looking all sharp and clean. And if you want to talk about a culture clash, bro, there was a culture clash.
Really?
I'm working in a warehouse, guy. I mean,
yeah, you're right. People,
and here I am strutting through, and I may have already mentioned I don't have a degree. I've got like 6 college credit hours to my name. I think I took speech and some programming of a language that's now dead. That doesn't even, I think it was Pascal was what I trained in. So I had 6 whole hours. But my point is, they called me college boy because of the way that I would walk through the warehouse and the fact that I wore, clean clothes.
Yeah. Well, you were a professional image that, once again, we, all have stereotypes of how things are supposed to be,
Exactly. So, but man, after I adapted a bit and other things changed within the facility a little bit, we got to where we were seeing eye to eye. But honestly, I never really fit in the warehouse. And we had built a brand new facility, and we moved from Coppell, Texas over to Louisville, Texas. And I designed the training facility. I had a training war room, as we called it. And I had my office that was connected to the war room, and it was just so cat daddy. And the distribution center manager came to me one day. He goes, "Hey, we got somebody new coming. I need your office. Get out." And I'm like, "Well, what?" I said, "Where do you want me to go?" He says, "I don't care. Just pack your stuff and get out." He goes, "You can go in the cafeteria for all I care." I was like, "Oh, this is awesome." So that was a fun day. But after about, I don't know, a day or so, he comes to me, goes, "Hey, you want to go upstairs?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to go upstairs," because that was the office, right, of the DC, and that was where the IT department was. He goes, "Well, hey, I'm gonna get you up in IT. How's that?" I'm like, "All right, cool." And it worked out because they were implementing a new software package for their entire company, and it's a global company. They've been around since 1915. They're massive.
Oh wow!
And so they were rolling out this new software package, and they needed trainers for the software. And so I went from from implementing training procedures in the warehouse to being one of the trainers on the core team for the JD Edwards implementation. And JD Edwards is the name of the package. So that got me into IT. And then for the next 18, 19 years, I wrote it out in IT. And January 4th of this year, I think that was Monday, was a Monday. I think that was my last day. And I stepped away. I'm podcasting and doing content creation and talking to good folks like you each and every day. I love it.
Isn't it fun? I dig it too, So how long ago did you start? I believe you just launched a second podcast. Is that right?
Well, I had, and that's I did rebrand,
Okay.
and I rebranded and launched another show. And that, let me tell you, was a lesson in and of itself. And I have since, with advice from my coach and several others, I killed the brand new show that I just launched on November 1st. Here we are. We're knocking on February's door here at the end of January, whatever today is. See, when you're
Yeah, I don't even
self-employed,
know.
you don't know what
You
day
lose
is on.
track.
You
Day
just
and
go-
the day of the week.
you just go, oh, I'm awake. Okay, cool. I need to work. So, so but yeah. So what I ended up doing was I do a lot of coaching and a lot of podcast launches and a lot of guidance for others that are in the podcast game. And one of the key things that we talk about and the motivating factor behind my original rebrand was the fact that we talk about the riches are in the niches. And if you're going to make money podcasting, you have to niche down. Well, my show is called, and it has been called for years, Readily Random.
Okay.
So that's not very niche. It says it in the name. We're not niche, and that was really the idea behind it. And even Readily Random was my second show. My first show was a comedy show that I had launched, and it was inspired by the comedians of the 80s. And podcasting as a whole was inspired because it was me looking for an outlet in my new sober reality. So about a year or so before I started podcasting, I got sober. Prior to that, I was a hardcore alcoholic. I had missed work. It was 13 was the year that really everything came to a head. I believe it was July of 13. I ended up in the hospital for the first time with alcohol poisoning.
Oh, geez.
Played it off. I was in there for about 3 days, and then I played it off at the office. But I was close. I mean, I've been there 20 years, right? Well, at the time I hadn't been there 20 years, but I'd been there 14 years or so. So
for the most part, were you functioning alcoholic for the most part?
At the time,
yeah.
Up until 13, I was functioning.
Yeah, okay.
And I believe it was 12 was the first time I ever realized that, oh shit, I've got a problem. And it was when they called a meeting, and for some reason I had a panic attack.
Oh, wow.
And that panic attack caused me to just get drenched in sweat. And I'm talking, my khakis look like camouflage because I was sweating so much. They were soaked. And I'm sitting here paranoid as all get out, because I'm sitting here with the VP of our information systems, our IT department. He's the VP of the whole department. And I'm standing next to him having this impromptu meeting, just drenched.
Wow.
And so he and I were personal friends as well. So he knew me, and he knew some of the struggles that I was going through. But then he also realized this, and I didn't think, I thought, oh, he doesn't know. I played it off. He didn't say anything. So when I went in the spittle about 6 months later or so, 9 months later, again, I played it off to everybody that I worked with, and they were cool and supportive. And I got back, and he called me in his office, and he goes, hey, here's how it is, man. I know exactly why you're in the hospital. You can play it off as you were sick or whatever it was, but we both know why you were there, and you're going to do one of two things. It's either never going to happen again, or you're going to pack your stuff. It's just that simple. And I was like, okay. I'll fly right, man. I'll fly right. So I sobered up for a couple of months, and there's always, man, when you're fighting that addiction, and I'm sure your listeners can relate, there's always a reason to go back to it.
Amen.
I had a bad day. I had a flat. I had this, I had that. And it goes, you know what? Today is a good day. I'm just going to get a small bottle. I'm just going to get me a small bottle. I'm going to throw back a little bit. I'm not going to buy the handle or anything. I'm just going to get the small bottle, and everything's going to be cool. And of course, the small bottle grows, and it grows. And next thing you know, I'm back buying 4 handles a week of Seagram's gin. That was my drink of choice for whatever reason. It was disgusting. But I'll tell you why, because I love Bombay. Bombay Sapphire was my favorite drink to just sip and hang out with Bombay and act all sophisticated. But I mean, it gets pretty expensive when you're doing shots of Bombay.
Oh, geez.
So I started doing shots of Seagram's. But yeah, so later on that year, it was in November-ish. Actually, I probably ended up staying home starting in October. I had been out for about 3 weeks now, and just on the worst bender of any bender that ever bent. And I remember I still have the very couch. Maybe I need to buy a new one. It's been a while. Shouldn't brag that anyway, it's not the same couch. So I was sitting in there, man. And it was the 14th of November of 13. And I'm telling you, dude, this sounds so cheesy, but something, a voice,
Dude,
something,
I get it.
an epiphany occurred, and it said, dude, get on your phone right now. Ask, I'm about to cry, bro.
Dude, don't worry. I get it. I do that.
We'll get into that too, because I've cried more this month than I've ever cried in my whole life.
The older I get, the easier it is for me to cry for some reason.
And I was so crazy. But anyways, I was sitting there and this voice came to me and said, look, dude, either you're going to get help or tomorrow's not going to come. It's real simple, because I was to the point that maybe put it in perspective for people, because they don't, if you haven't battled addiction and you felt it, you can't grasp it. But I mean, this is coming from a guy that was a 3-week bender easy, meaning I took nothing in but alcohol. How I survived. Geez. And I would throw back some Special K drinks, those like Carnation Special K breakfast drinks. But I would put those down, and then they're immediately going to come back, because nothing would stay down for anything in the world. And is that my dog? That is my dog.
Be.
Hold on.
Right. It's all right. That doesn't bother me, man.
I don't know. I love my Chihuahua, but I hate her
sound effects. Okay. And, Larry's quieting down that dog, what he's talking about, when that epiphany comes or that voice, oftentimes, there's something that wakes you up. And I was just kind of telling while you were stepped away, as you were talking about kind of that epiphany or that voice, I've had the same thing. I had a situation as well. And it's, when it's time, it's time.
Yeah. And, I apologize for that. I know we're right in the middle of a great situation there.
No worries. Continue on.
Why you have dogs there to ruin things. But I was to the point where I knew when I took a drink, it was coming back. And it had been that way for months. The first one or second one was the first one definitely coming back. The second one, maybe not. It was iffy. So I would do my first shot of the evening over the sink, because I knew. Wow. I mean, it was just that that's where it was going to happen. But then as I progressed, I was drinking all day. Essentially, I would wake up in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., 2 or 3 shots, go back to sleep or pass out. Yeah, more accurate. I'd get up, and my wife and I, we worked at the same company. So we would carpool together, of course. And I'd wait for her to turn the hairdryer on to do her hair. And I'd slip in the freezer and I'd sneak me 2 or 3 more shots while she's doing her hair. So I'd get liquored up before I went to work. Then next thing you know, I was always running around with the guys. We do lunch or whatever. Well, suddenly I don't want to go to lunch with the guys. Oh, it's the same dose. We say the same thing over and over. I'm just going to go to the house and check on the dogs or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Come home, 2 or 3 shots. So that eventually made it to the point where I couldn't even function at work. How I maintained my position with this company is beyond me. I was graced with a tremendous support system, and I mean, my life would have been over at the time if I didn't have the support that I had. I mean, I said some things to people that were just unbelievable. I mean, insulted friends, I mean, it was horrible.
That wreckage around those, especially those that we love the most, we take for granted.
Exactly. And it just gets decimated. And as I sat there that day, again, that voice came to me and said, get some help or tomorrow's not going to come. It was that clear, bro. It was that clear after weeks of 100% intoxication.
Wow.
It was just that clear. And I got on the phone. I called my best friend. I said, dude, you need to give me some help. And he happened to work at the same company also. So he walked over to my wife's department and said, Larry just called. He's in a bad way. And then they went and contacted a few others. And next thing you know, they whisk in and they take me to rehab. Now I'm at the rehab facility for a few hours, and I don't remember any of this. This is all based on what you told me, because they got there, and I was so happy that they were there that I was celebrating shots. I was like, "Oh, this is great! Yeah, we're gonna get some help." They said I did about 5 shots again after they got there, and that I just would not go. I wouldn't go. It was just I was always coming up with the reason. Hold on, let me just do one more shot.
Exactly.
And anyways, they said finally I passed out again, and they dragged my ass to the truck and took me away. But when they got me to the facility, I was so far gone that the facility, after a couple of hours, said we can't even stabilize this guy. He's toast. So they call an ambulance to the rehab facility. Ambulance comes in, and they wheel me out on a gurney, take me to the spittle, and now I do another 4 or 5 days in the spittle. stabilizing.
Jeez.
And I can remember somewhat of that stay. But the main thing I remember is they wouldn't let me out until I could make a lap, because the floor of the hospital, the floor that I was on, it was kind of like an oval shaped, and you could walk all the way around the floor. And they said that I needed to be able to walk the floor one time without stumbling before they'd release me. And I can remember looking down at those 12-inch tiles going, all right, man, one foot in front of the other, follow the line, follow. And I finally got out of there. And well, I went straight from there. They called the rehab facility. They came and got me.
Picked you up.
And then I went to their detox, hung out in their detox for a week, which is really just detox. They had a whole wing of the facility that was just for those that are in that first week.
Well, you've got to be monitored, because most people don't know. You can definitely die coming off alcohol.
100%. And so I was in that spot of the facility for a week, and then I did 6 more weeks within the main facility there. And I've been sober ever since. So
dude, congrats. That's awesome.
Appreciate it.
That's fantastic. So then you had your job when you got done, I assume?
Oh yeah. I walked right back in. Here's the level of support that I had. No one was even allowed to ask.
Really?
Don't ask where Larry's at. He'll be back. Don't ask.
Dude, that's incredible.
When he comes back, don't say, hey, where you been, buddy?
Right.
There's none of that. We act like this didn't even happen. It didn't go through HR. It didn't go through any of the official channels. It was just shut down. It was like Larry's taking leave of absence and he's gone for a while.
Yeah, to me, that says a ton about those people, but also says something, ton about you, dude, because, that just doesn't happen every day,
No,
so they're obviously great people, but you had a connection, they had a love for you that, I get that. That's hard for me to talk about, because if I didn't have similar, I wouldn't be here,
Dude,
so I get it, man.
So many people don't get it, and they think they get it, but I know you do, being with your background and your history, but so many people don't realize that. And, and you can look at people, and what I see so often that is kind of frustrating is people look at those that are in the throes of addiction, and they may be fighting, but they're not supporting them because, they keep choosing this, they keep choosing that. And
it's more of a judgment. Yep.
Yeah, it's a judgment. It's not a support, know, and I had real support, and I know that. And honestly, the universe was, and this sounds so cheesy because I'm not a universe kind of guy, but everything worked out. Tragically, I lost my grandmother in 2009.
Oh, man.
Well, little did I know that she had oil royalties. I'd heard of them, and I'd seen a couple of checks here and there, but they're like $25 or whatever. And I'm like, not even worth messing with, because I mean, they're dried up, I guess. About a year before I go into the rehab, I get a call from an oil company. They go, hey, we're looking for your grandmother. They named her. And I said, she's deceased. I inherited everything. What's going on? They said, well, you might want to look into this because we got something we need to give you. And it was not a massive amount of cash, but it was a significant amount of cash that was, for me, I was like, holy crap, this is great. But if it wasn't for that cash, I wouldn't have been able to afford to go to treatment.
Dude, it's crazy how things, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, man.
Yeah.
You're just little tender mercies, miracles, And it is nuts.
I was able to go to one of the number 1 facilities in the state of Texas and one of the highest ranked in the nation. It was a facility that I had no business being at. It was super nice. It was like a freaking Hilton. I had a cabin after I graduated out of the detox center. I had my own little private cabin with my own little, everything was all secluded. And we walk from the cabin across the grounds to the main room. And it was tremendous. I'm not going to lie. It was great. But none of that would have happened had everything else not fallen into place, had I not had the support system that I had. Because even with that little windfall that grandma left me to save me once again, grandma was a huge contributor to my life. And she's one of the reasons I'm still here today. The primary reason, honestly. Wow. But had all of that not happened and had that support, because when I made the call to get some help, my friend got my wife, and he went and got someone else. They happened to live next door to one of the doctors that is a partial owner of the facility.
Wow.
And they got me hooked up at a discounted rate. Now, granted, the discounted rate, I still wouldn't have been able to afford if it wasn't for this other money. But it was just the way things come together, man. It's mind blowing to go, wow, sit back and you look at all of these things that had to fall into place in order for me to get where I'm at today.
And at the specific times that they're all falling in is just
Exactly.
incredible.
Everything. I
Wow.
mean, they're if that money had come from grandma in 2009 when she passed away, I don't know, I'd have bought a toy of some sort. I can promise you
Yeah.
that. I got my house and I got a pretty comfortable life. I'm definitely lower middle class America, and I'm just living my life. So I definitely would have bought something cool, maybe a 4-wheeler or two,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't
Right.
it wouldn't have been life changing and life saving had it not taken place the way and in the timeline that it took place. So
Wow, that's amazing. So you're back to the other job, and then a few years, and all of a sudden, you've been podcasting for how long until January 4th when you quit that job?
I've been podcasting since about 14. Late 14 is when I kicked it off. And again, it was an outlet for me because I still needed. I've always had that, one, entrepreneurial spirit. I've always had that side hustle.
Uh-huh.
And when I first started podcasting, I thought they were stupid. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'm not going to listen to somebody talk for hours on end, yawn. Well, a friend of mine finally said, dude, just listen to Joe Rogan. And being a massive fight fan, I've been an Ultimate Fighting Championship fan since '93 when it kicked off. I've never missed a show except for this past weekend. I missed an hour and a half because Dana White, the ESPN went down for an hour and a half this past weekend. Yeah, they
saw
it.
Yeah. No way.
In
Dallas, in your area.
Several regions throughout the United States were blacked out for the first hour and 20 minutes of the show. So I missed the first two fights.
Oh, gosh.
So I am going ballistic, and I'm tweeting Dana White, telling him to get his act together, to get off Twitter, quit playing on Twitter, get on the horn with ESPN, let's get this fixed.
Wow.
But it eventually came around, and I got to see the last 3 fights, which are fine. But anyways, massive fight fan, and I don't know where I'm going with that. Oh yeah, so I knew who Joe Rogan was. So and of course Fear Factor and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, fine, I'll give it a listen because I do love his commentary at the UFC. And he had another comedian on there the day that I listened. It was probably Tony Hinchcliffe or Joey Diaz, one of the guys that are in the Joe Rogan clique. And when I heard the discussion, it took me back to being a kid, man. It took me back to the 80s because especially Joey Diaz, he's like the second coming of Sam Kinison and Andrew Dice Clay combined, and then high all the time, right? And I'm not an advocate for smoking or anything, but that's just how they are on that show. Yep. And I was blown away at what I heard, and I was laughing so hard, and I was like, "Holy crap, man! This is where I need to be. I've got to do this." So I fired up a podcast and even started doing some touring here in the local DFW area. I say touring. I was going around to all the open mics and hitting the open mics, and I took comedy classes and did some stand-up at the Improv. I was in a showcase at the Improv here in Dallas. So did the whole comedy thing for a while, but noted that at the same time, I'm still working for that same company. And while Larry is going through his own cultural shift and evolving, well, the company is too, making massive strides, growing. Their entire philosophy is changing, more corporate, and you're starting to see a more stringent corporate feel get put in place, and
putting the reins on you.
Yeah, and I'm like, let's be honest, I'm pretty comfortable here, and I don't think I'm really going to get into this whole, this whole, I don't know, corporate movement that you got going here. I'm still going to tell my dirty jokes at work. I'm still going to talk. I mean, it's just how this is me. Yeah. So, but it didn't work out that way. But so I got a new boss, and he heard my podcast, and my podcast, even though it was an adult comedy podcast.
Gotcha.
A lot of naughty words, was followed by a lot of people in the office. They loved it. And I don't want to get her in trouble, but even the HR director at the time was a fan of the show. She listened. She's like, dude, that was so funny, whatever. So it worked out. But this guy, he was much more corporate and much more set in his ways to the way things are. And he goes, look, I don't like the show. I don't like what you say on your show. And you represent this company each and every day of the week. And you can't crap. Oh, dude, it was insane. Jeez. And I'll tell you, he didn't tell me not to do the show, but it's
so many words. Yeah,
exactly. But it's one of those situations where you go, okay, I'm going to have to evolve. And so at the time, I was kind of coming into the situation where I was comfortable talking about addiction, and I thought, you know what, maybe he's right. Maybe I need to do something to make an impact instead of just telling locker room jokes 24/7. Maybe I need to do something here. So Readily Random, the name was a blog of mine way back in the MySpace days. And
wow.
yeah. So I've always liked the name. I don't know why. Probably because I'm fairly random. If you look behind me, I got a lot
like it. It actually, it just comes right off the tongue,
So I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something similar to what you are actually doing right now. And I'm going to talk to those that have battled addiction. I'm going to talk to those that have battled their challenges in life and came out on the other side and came out on top. And that's how Readily Random started out. It was, it wasn't necessarily an addiction geared show or an addiction driven show. It was although addiction would be a major part of it and overcoming addiction would be a major part of it, it was more of just overcoming life's challenges and finding your way again to success.
Exactly.
And I did that for several episodes, and I found out that I was still a little raw to that, to be someone that was hosting that type of show.
Gotcha.
I just wasn't in the middle space to maintain it the way that I thought I would be.
Yeah.
And that sounds cheesy. People can pass judgment, whatever. It just wasn't working for me. So it started to evolve. And then I had, I don't know, just anybody that I was interested in. I would go out and people go, how do you find guests for your podcast, Larry? Well, I would go out to Amazon and I'd go into the books on Amazon. I'd go into the Kindle section and I would look for authors that had some cool books on topics that I loved, right? I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. Reach out. Those authors, man, those egos, they come into play.
Exactly.
Yes, I promise you. They say yes. So
I talking about
all kinds of people, man. If you go back into some of the earlier episodes of the show, I've got, and this is a little insight that I probably shouldn't share, but I like origami. I like to fold a little paper. I like to make a swan from time to time. Okay, bro. So I had one of the cat daddies from MIT, the college MIT. Come on, he's one of the top origami artists in the nation, and he's the only American to be ever given origami guru status by the Japanese origami. I mean, he's the cat daddy, and he's made these massive, massive folds because he's a mathematician.
Right.
At MIT, and origami is all math, which that turned me off immediately. I was like, really? I thought I was just folding paper. Yeah. I don't need all this geometry and stuff. That's not for me. But no, seriously, it was so cool. Just talking to these people that are in these positions that you would never get the chance to talk to. And that blew me away about the medium. And I knew I was hooked. I was just blown away. And actually, I was hooked with the first show. I loved what I was doing, met a lot of cool people, man.
Yeah.
A lot of fun combos. And I'm like, this is so cool. But Readily Random slowly evolved into an entrepreneurial show. And that was kind of the direction it was going. And I saw people doing things with podcasting that I was like, what? I might not have to go to work. This could be cool, buddy. And I'll tell you though, so many people look at monetization of their podcast in a way of, they want affiliate links or they want to do these funnels and they want to do this and that. And I'm like, that's not for me. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's a lot of work there. And I'm a firm believer in getting paid for doing nothing. I love that.
Amen.
So not really, I'm kidding there, but kind of, but I was like, that's just not my path. And so what I did was I ended up using my podcast as a launch platform for so many other things that I was already skilled with. I was a facilitator for years and years and years. So what are you going to do? I'm going to write a course. I wrote my course. It seems like for podcast monetization, you have to have two things. One is a book and one is a course. So I wrote the course, I wrote the book, and guess what? I mentioned this earlier. I hired coaches for each. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So I thought, you know what I'm going to do? It's going to take a little bit. It's going to cost me a little bit to hire this coach, but I'm going to get this social proof, which now I'm kind of cheesy for me personally. But at the time, it was that stepping stone. You know what I mean? It was exactly what I needed to do. So I hired a coach. I got an Amazon #1 bestseller. I hired a coach. I got a high performing course on Udemy, and it's still doing well to this day. I've got nearly, I haven't checked the numbers in a while. I'm assuming I was well over 700 the last time I checked. So we'll say 800 students by now.
Is that a digitized course?
Yeah, it's a digital online course.
Yep.
And I was like, what do I know anything about? So, and I didn't really know what to write about. So I just wrote a book on podcasting and I wrote my course on podcasting.
Bingo.
So things have now evolved. I'm writing courses with some of the top podcast cat daddies in the game. Honestly, I'm under contract. Cool. And I'm just like, what? But it's really, it all boils down to, it was just creating relationships, giving as much value as I could up front, without looking for anything coming back. And then But see, the thing that people don't get, bro, is that they want that instant gratification. They want that instant high. They want that crack rock. If you watch that recent crack documentary on Netflix, I watched that just the other day. I was like, oh my God, I'm back in the 80s. This is so crazy because I lived through that.
What's
crack.
it called? Do you know?
It's just called crack.
Oh, crack.
It's called crack. Crack. It's called cocaine. There's 3 C's underneath it for the subtitle. Cocaine, something, and conspiracy. Check it out, man. It's crazy. But they want, and people don't know that's why people love crack so much, because it's an instant hit.
Yeah. Yep.
And that instant gratification is what people look for in this game, in the podcasting space, and really everything. Everybody,
I was gonna say everything. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, we live in an instant gratification world, and those that are jumping into the podcast space for instant gratification, they're going to realize, man, this isn't what it's about.
Yeah.
The route that I took may not be for everybody, and that's fine. That's cool. It's the way that I did it.
Right.
But it was a long game. It took me 5.5, 6 years to get to where it was, where I could step out. Now, we had talked earlier about, I think we were talking in the green room or something before we kicked the show off, about having that entrepreneurial spirit. And
when we were having our hors d'oeuvres and stuff.
Yeah. And
right. Makeup.
I had a business before, right? And even when I worked at the company, I had a side hustle, had a swimming pool company that I founded from the ground up.
Oh, cool.
And it was pristine pools and spas. It sounds so pretty. And
that's the name for that clientele, possibly.
Exactly. Well, you want your pool to be pristine, right? So it's pools and spas. So I built it from 0 clients to well over 50 before I sold it. And at the time, it was either, do I sell it or do I jump ship right now? And back then, I wasn't in the position to confidently jump ship. I didn't look at it and go, well, even if I don't do anything for a year or so, I'm still going to be okay. So that's why I didn't step out then. And that's why I sold that business and just, I bought me a truck off the deal. I mean, it got me a little something, but nothing really, no bragging rights per se, but it was an experience and I learned a lot.
Oh yeah.
But even then, I still had side hustles, from eBay to whatever it may be. There was just anything I could sell or anything I could do to provide a service for a fee. I'm in it, man. That was my thing. As long as it was online, I ain't going to do no real work.
Yeah.
That's why that swimming pool company didn't work out. I was like, man, this cleaning pools.
No kidding.
No, not really. But it's just one of those things, again, to take it back to where I was going, and the fact that it's not instant gratification and that it takes time and it takes patience to build it this way. And that's, I believe, what's firmly allowed me to make this transition as of this month. Here we are at the end of January. I think January 4th, as we mentioned, was the day that was my last day in corporate America. And I was able to plan. People, it's funny, my wife came home from the office yesterday, and as I mentioned, we both worked for the same company. And so some people that we've known for 15, 20 years together, because I know my wife worked there 20 years and I was there 21, and are coming up to her going, hey, how's Larry doing? How's that podcast thing going? I don't know how y'all are going to make any money doing it, but man, make sure you do this and this and this. And they came up to her and said, they were telling her how to use her check as the primary source of income. While I'm like, do you really think I stepped out with no planning whatsoever?
Yeah.
It's insane. So, I mean, and this is what I want a lot of folks to understand, is that I stepped out, but man, I don't have a vehicle. I sold my vehicle. We had 2 vehicles. For one, why the heck do we need 2 vehicles?
Yeah,
we work
exactly.
at the same company. We live at the same house, so we didn't need it in the first place. It was a vanity vehicle. Had this Cat Daddy Jeep, all custom, and I sold my Jeep. I planned ahead. We saved up tons of cash so that if I don't manage to land some clients over this next year or so, that we can still survive. And we laid it out and we planned it out. And then finally, when we were both, she's still not super comfortable, but when we were both comfortable, I took that step, but my wife, she's much more traditionally minded in that you just go to work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. You don't like it, tough. You still got to go to work. That's just how it is. And after what I've been through in my life, I'm just not buying it. It's just not my gig. And I mentioned before that I haven't cried this much in I don't know how long, but the slightest little thing this whole month, and maybe I don't know what it is, but I guess it's the freedom or the relief or the release or I'm just ecstatic. I'm so freaking happy.
Well, that's the thing. I get sense you're doing something that you're totally in. You're passionate about it. You just love it. I mean,
and how often do you do that? And
exactly.
I realize that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a whole litany of individuals that helped me get here and continue to help me to this day. They continue to support me to this day. But just the fact that it was, I don't, I mean, you know, I go just the fact, but I don't know that I have the fact. Honestly, I really don't.
Yeah.
It's just that I do love it. I put in a lot of work behind it. I mean, I also went to school for voiceover. I went to an acting college here in Dallas, and I took their voiceover 1 and 2 courses and hired a voiceover coach and did a little bit of voiceover. I'm in some video game that I couldn't tell you the name of, and I played an orc. I was like, oh, go kill them or something. You know, I mean, it was cool though, but it was one of those things where to me, it was all part of the groundwork of moving into the direction that I wanted to move.
Yeah.
A lot of folks don't understand that's you got to build it, man. You got to build it, and it's not going to come overnight.
Yeah, I think the thing that I heard that resonates the most with me, and you know, my experience is that, and I mentioned it earlier. You know, I forgot that I didn't have success, you know, in my first life, if you will, overnight, and you got to play the long game. You know, for the last really 10 years, I still do have the business, but I was in a business that I'd never enjoyed, never planned to be in. Frankly, I wasn't even in with both feet and totally committed, you know?
Right.
But I finally figured out, well, if I do this and this, I could actually create that, which will allow me then to go chase things I'm more passionate about. And so we oftentimes, like you mentioned, that was just a springboard for me. That was just part of the process to get me down the path, you know? And so oftentimes I think people get hung up on thinking, well, you know, I don't have enough time. Number one, that's an excuse. It's just how bad do you want something? You know, you were still doing the full-time job, but then you created your podcast and we're doing it for a few years. You know, it's how bad do you want something? Are you willing to do the work? And obviously it's paying off, and you're, you know, able to quit now. And now, you know, you got some things that sound like they're a blast, number one, but obviously going to make you a good living too, you know? So, and, you know, the thing that I think is the most impactful, and you hit on it, is, you know, providing that value up front. How much, you know, value can you give somebody without even looking for anything, you know? And that's really, you know, that's the way it works. And, you know, it's, you know, you said earlier, you're not a big, you know, guy on the energy or the universe or whatever, but, you know, call it what you will. Things just happen, you know, when you're focused on others. You know, I was so in the grind so many times over this past, you know, 10 years when I was kind of just struggling and trying to just get by or whatever, that I was so stuck because I'm only focused on me and how I'm going to make, you know, my income rather than focusing on the people I'm serving, you know.
Right.
And then you shift that and then things just evolve. And that's exactly what, you know, happened. It sounds like that's what obviously happened with you. And, you know, most of the guys that I interact with and have kind of followed, that's the way it works, you know. And I don't care who you are, you know, you can be miserable, angry, depressed, you know, have anxiety, but when you're helping somebody else, you can't feel that stuff, man.
Right.
It's impossible. Right. You know, that's what gives me the most fulfillment out of anything I've ever done, is how can I help somebody, you know? And oftentimes, you know, my wife get on me because, you know, you're spending too much time, you know, you're not getting paid for this or that. I'm like, but it all works out, man. You know, I'd rather be that way than the opposite way. You know, I'll take a few stabs in the back along the journey from those people that think they got a shortcut and try to get, you know, past and take advantage, because things will take care of them. I don't need to, you know, just
right. My wife's the exact same way, bro. She why are you doing this for free? Why are you doing this other thing again for why do you have another client? You want to call them a client, but they're not paying you anything. Why are you doing it for free?
Yeah.
She's so traditional in that way that she doesn't understand, man, that giving is part of the reward itself. But exactly, you know, it's going to come back because people want to help those that want to help. It's just it's just the way that things are, man. And she's starting to go, oh, huh, maybe you're right after all. Maybe all that free stuff you did, maybe that was in an effort to achieve a goal. And of course, now you got to be careful the way you word that. And I don't know how long your show goes, because I can go for hours.
Yeah, me too. got to respect your time, so we can wrap it up here in the next 5 or 10. But
That's fine. But it can sound it can sound selfish at the same time, almost as though you're self-serving by serving.
yep,
And that's not the message here at all.
Not
And
at
I
all.
don't want to get that twisted at all. It's just the way it works out. The more you give, the more, you call it fate, you can call it whatever you want to call it. It comes back in droves. And
Yep.
operating from that spirit and operating from that place is what allows me to even sit here and have this conversation with you today.
Yep.
Do you think that, and I have to hit my wife with this, I'm like, do you think that those people would have supported me during my time of need had I not treated them the same way that I treat everybody today? Had I not been giving? Had I not demonstrated a true care for what they were doing? But look how that came back to me. It literally, bro, it literally saved my life.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I want to stress that's what it's all about. I wouldn't have this conversation today if it wasn't for the fact that I invested in people up front and that I did things for people and that I genuinely cared for people, because in turn they cared for me. And here we are today.
Yeah,
man, I got on a soapbox here for a second. Sorry about that.
Dude, but no, that's because that's, I mean, coming from, where I've been, I can understand where you were. And had you not been that kind of guy, and you would have been that obnoxious kind of guy, or maybe not obnoxious isn't the right word, but didn't connect in a way that you did with people's hearts, you probably would be dead.
Yeah, 100%. Don't get me wrong. I definitely went through that phase of my life where I was that guy that nobody gave a crap. And I still got my black belt hanging here behind me, a little right there. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it in the background, but karate was my life. Fighting was life. Everything was if I couldn't beat my way through a situation, then I didn't need to be a part of it. You know what I'm saying? And
Absolutely.
I didn't care. My attitude was horrible. I was a horrible person, but I ended up getting humbled quite a bit. So
right. And I think that comes down to, really what's in your heart,
Yeah.
I was the same way. There was times I was a prideful prick, for lack of a better way to say it. I thought I knew everything, mostly around those I loved and cared about the most, honestly.
Sure.
Which is really sick, when you think about it. It's like we hurt the ones we take for granted, the ones we love the most, And
right.
It is kind of messed up, but it's all part of the experience. I think, what I get from you too is you've looked at the things you've been through, you've learned from it to help improve and grow, because I'm a big believer that, we can't find the light without going through the dark. You cannot get to where you need to go or become that best. I hate to say this, it's overused, but that best version of yourself,
sure.
Without the trials is part of it. It's how we respond to them, so there's a lot of people out there struggling right now. This last year has been brutal. This coming year may be worse. We don't know. And, so if you're struggling, the thing I'd say, like you did when you had that kind of voice hit you, if you're depressed, whatever it is, even if you're not dealing with addiction, don't let pride get in the way of reaching out, man, because the journey is so much tougher when you're alone. And when you're in a bad space, if you're not going to reach out and talk to people or get any help, your mind's just going to create stories that take you in a much darker place. And, everybody out there, at least the way I believe, is we're all imperfect, but we're all here and came to this earth to have everything and anything we desire, and so don't cheat yourself, and don't beat up on yourself, as an addict. And you mentioned earlier, I'll only do, one shot, I remember even giving my bottle of pills, because mine was opiates, my drug of choice, and I'd give them to one of my employees. He was someone I could talk to. He had a brother that had issues, but we become great manipulators and BSers, and so I went down that same journey trying to control things, but that's not the way it works. It's really all or nothing. But the one thing that I would do, and I'm not sure if you would do that, but as you're trying to make those steps and trying to give it up, so to speak, and then you quote fail, the worst thing we can do is just keep beating up on ourselves and having the shame and the guilt, because that just makes it that much easier to want to keep going and doing the stuff to numb out those feelings,
Sure.
So it's life's a crazy journey, but I think it's it's really, what do we want to get from it? What can we learn from the bullshit we go through,
As long as we learn,
Exactly.
we understand we are going to learn. Experience doesn't necessarily mean we learn. A lot of people experience a lot of stuff and they don't learn anything from it. It's the lessons that are given to us as we experience things and we go through these things and these trials and these tribulations and these times in our lives where we don't know if there's going to be a tomorrow. The lessons that come out of that are what change us and what make us into. I mean, I know that I wouldn't be sitting here today, not just the whole life-saving thing, but just it molded me as an individual.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be self-employed right now. I guarantee you, if I hadn't gone through all the BS back in 13, that I would be unemployed. I'm not unemployed.
Right.
That I would be self-employed today. It's so funny. And it's kind of a running joke. I am unemployed but I do have a company, and my wife, she still says I'm unemployed. And especially if she gets mad at me because she went to the office today and she's like, that's fine. If you just want to sit home all day and do nothing, you don't have a job anyway. So awesome. I've got that whole unemployed thing in my head. She's such a supportive bride, but no, she really is. She just gives me a hard time. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I wouldn't be self-employed. I wouldn't be podcasting full time. I wouldn't be experiencing some of the things that I'm experiencing now that I'm so beyond grateful for, and I can never imagine. But it's swallowing that pride and going, oh yeah, I did make some bad decisions. I was an idiot. I did do this, and not do it again, basically.
Right. Yeah. There's gifts in every trial, I believe. It's just like you said. Are we going to look and find them and learn? That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I really appreciate your time. So tell me just quickly so your podcast is still readily random. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And
you can find me on readilyrandom.com. All the episodes from the show are there. I did branch out with the other podcast. I'm not even going to say its name because of brand confusion. I don't want to confuse people, but I am going to take those. I had some great people that were on the launch of that show, and they deserve the full opportunity for their stories to be heard. So I am going to be transitioning all their stories over to Readily Random.
Cool.
So the 24-ish people that were there on that particular podcast, they'll get just as much play over here, and I'm so stoked about it. A lot of lessons that were learned there in that transition. But yeah, readilyrandom.com. You can find everything there. You can reach out to me. I'm generally readily random on all social media. Okay. As you mentioned before, I'm loving me some Clubhouse. Clubhouse is it, man. And I'm Larry Roberts on Clubhouse. Come follow me there. Matter of fact, Thursday night we're recording, and I don't know when this will go live, so I don't even know if it's worth mentioning. But this Thursday we're doing a live Q&A with David Hooper, who happens to be my podcasting coach, and he's the author of he's the author of Big Podcast, which is fairly much considered the encyclopedia of podcasting in the podcast space. So he and I are going to be coming on. We're going to be doing a live session. He's going to interview me about Clubhouse, and I'm going to talk to him about podcasting, and we're going to answer any kind of questions and take opinions from the listeners that we can get. So that's
on Thursday
night, 8 Central here in Dallas time. And we're going to make it happen. It's going to be a good time.
I'll jump in there. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, come on, man. He will be spewing a lot of knowledge. He's a stud.
To me, Clubhouse is incredible. I mean, I've been in lots of rooms where you're hearing from people like you, and there's some 7-8 figure, entrepreneurs, and some of the value you're getting from just sitting and listening in those rooms. You'd be paying $20 to $50K for a 3-day mastermind with some of these people. I mean, it's incredible. Some of the value.
That's what people aren't understanding about Clubhouse. They're going, I'm not going to get on Clubhouse.
It's the most powerful thing out there, in my opinion, right now.
Dude,
nothing close.
It takes social media and completely transforms it, and people don't get that. I don't need another this account or that account. I don't need to hear about this. Yes, you do. It doesn't matter what you do in your life, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're a day-to-day individual working the 9-to-5 grind. There is value on Clubhouse. It's not a place to hang out and hear what your buddy had for lunch, or tell whatever it is that we see with Twitter and we saw with Facebook and we still see with Facebook. It's not that at all. There is straight
up value. It is incredible.
1,000%. Yeah, it's a trip.
There's a lot of awesome stuff that you've shared today. But if I could say anything that we've talked about, if you're an entrepreneur, that's probably the biggest tip right now that out of everything we've said that you could go right now to start learning some things, you know, it's
Yeah,
that
100%.
incredible. It really is. So not that we didn't say some awesome nuggets today, but that is an incredible tip. I mean, cause it's an incredible tool. So,
Yeah, definitely.
well, man, brother, I appreciate it. I'll look for you on Thursday night. I'll have all your information in the notes as well. And just hope you have a fantastic Tuesday, if that's what it is. I think, yes.
It's Tuesday.
I think so. Like you said, I do have a hard time keeping track, but it's a beautiful thing. So, it's been fun chopping it up with you, and I'll stay in touch for sure, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's been a blast.
Okay, buddy. Take care.